What if a man climbed into the most dangerous place on Earth and simply vanished into thin air? This is not a ghost story. This is not a myth whispered by villagers at the foot of a mountain. This is real. It happened, and it happened on the Savage Mountain. K2 has always demanded blood. For every 4 climbers who reach its summit, 1 never comes back. Avalanches sweep the slopes clean. Temperatures freeze human flesh into stone. And oxygen levels drop so low that your brain begins to dream while you're still awake. It's a place where death doesn't just happen. It lingers, it waits, and it takes. But among all the chilling stories of K2, one stands out. A story that still keeps mountaineers, journalists, and conspiracy theorists awake at night. The story of Muhammad Ali Sadpara, Pakistan's most celebrated mountaineer. In February 2021, during the first ever attempt to summit K2 in winter, a feat thought to be nearly impossible, Ali Sadpara reached higher than anyone could have imagined. He climbed with raw determination, fueled by decades of experience and a reputation of being the man who could do the impossible. And then, he disappeared. No distress call, no farewell message, no final photograph, just silence. What really happened on that night? Did he stand on the summit of K2, the second highest point on Earth, before the mountain swallowed him whole? Or did something far darker happen in that frozen, oxygen-starved void? For the people of Pakistan, Ali was more than a climber. He was a symbol of pride, resilience, and the possibility of triumph against impossible odds. His death, or rather his disappearance, left behind more questions than answers. And even today, his name echoes in every conversation about the dangers of K2. Tonight, we dive into that story. Not just the man, not just the mountain, but the mystery itself. This is The Vanishing of Ali Sadpara, the Ghost of K2. Imagine this. You're standing above 8,000 meters. The air is razor thin. Each breath feels like a knife stabbing your lungs. The world below you has vanished into darkness. Ahead is only the summit of K2, shining like a cruel jewel in the moonlight. Your friends are behind you, weaker, slower, struggling to move. But you push forward, and then silence. Your headlamp disappears into the storm. No one ever sees you again. That was Ali Sadpara's fate, or so we think. Why does this story captivate so many? Because K2 is not just a mountain, it's a graveyard of ambition. And Ali Sadpara was not just another climber. He was the climber. He was the man who made the impossible look routine. A son of the soil, born in the harsh mountains of Gilgit-Baltistan, who rose from a simple porter to a legend of the climbing world. He climbed Nanga Parbat, Gasherbrum Wynantu, Broad Peak, Lhotse, and even Mount Everest. He was part of the first ever winter ascent of Nanga Parbat. Something thought impossible for decades, but his greatest dream was K2, not just to climb it, but to conquer it in the dead of winter. And in 2021, he set out to do just that. Alongside Iceland's Snorri and Chile's Juan Pablo Mohr, Ali pushed into what's known as the death zone, where human survival is measured in minutes. Not hours. They were last seen near the bottleneck, the deadliest stretch of the entire mountain. And then they were gone. Searches went on for days. Helicopters, drones, satellites. Nothing. Weeks later, when the bodies were finally found, more questions arose than answers. Where exactly did Ali fall? Did he reach the summit before his death? Why did no signal come from his equipment? And why even today does his disappearance feel like an unfinished story? And so we ask, what really happened to Ali Sadpara on K2? This is not just about a climber who vanished. This is about human endurance, national pride, unspeakable tragedy, and the mystery of a man who seemed too strong to die, yet disappeared into the savage mountain's eternal silence. Stay with us as we retrace his final steps, explore the theories behind his disappearance, and uncover why the name Ali Sadpara will forever haunt the slopes of K2. Because sometimes, the scariest stories are not about ghosts. They're about real people, real heroes, and real deaths that make no sense. Before Ali Sadpara became a legend etched into the snow and rock of K2, he was a boy from a forgotten valley. Ali was born in 1976, in a tiny village in Sadpara near Skardu, Gilgit-Baltistan. If the name of the valley sounds unfamiliar, it's because life there is brutally simple, isolated, and unforgiving. Children grew up in the thin mountain air, learning to climb before they could even spell the word. They carried water, wood, and sometimes heavy sacks across icy trails that outsiders would never dare to cross. Ali was no different. His family was poor, very poor. Opportunities were scarce, education was limited, but the mountains, they were everywhere. For some, the mountains were a prison. For Ali, they were a promise. While most people dream of escaping poverty by moving to cities, Ali chose to climb higher, literally. As a teenager, he worked as a high-altitude porter, carrying loads of 20-30 kilograms for foreign expeditions. Imagine this. While others wore down jackets worth thousands of dollars, Ali climbed in simple patched clothes, sometimes in sandals. Yet he kept pace, even outpaced the world's best climbers. The turning point came when climbers started to notice. Here was this wiry, determined young man from Pakistan who could climb as if gravity didn't exist. He wasn't just strong, he was smart, adaptive, and utterly fearless. By the early 2000s, Ali was no longer just a porter. He was climbing side by side with international teams. In 2006, he scaled Gasherbrum 2. Then came Broad Peak, Gasherbrum 1, Nanga Parbat, Lhotse, and even Everest. His list of summits grew, but so did his reputation. People started calling him the Snow Leopard of Pakistan. But to the locals, he was simply Ali Bhai, Brother Ali, a humble man who returned home after each expedition, smiling, sitting on the floor with his children, drinking tea as if he hadn't just touched the roof of the world. Yet there was one achievement that truly cemented his legacy. In 2016, alongside Alex Chicon and Simone Moro, Ali made history by completing the first ever winter ascent of Nanga Parbat. For decades, Nanga had been called the Killer Mountain, defying every attempt to climb it in winter. Ali was the missing piece that made the impossible possible. From that moment, his name was whispered with reverence in the global climbing community. But even then, his heart was restless. There was one summit still calling him K2 in winter. K2 in summer is already a monster. Its slopes are steeper than Everest's, its weather far more violent and its routes less forgiving. By 2020, fewer than 400 people had ever stood on K2's summit, compared to over 5,000 on Everest. And in winter, no one had ever succeeded. For decades, K2 remained the only 8,000-meter peak unclimbed in the coldest season. Dozens had tried, all had failed. Some had died. Why? Because winter on K2 is not just winter, it's hell. Temperatures plummet to 65 °C. Winds blast at 150 kilometers per hour. Frostbite takes minutes, hypoxia kills silently, and avalanches sweep entire camps into oblivion. Even Sherpas, renowned for their resilience, had been pushed back by the savage mountain's wrath. For mountaineers, conquering K2 in winter was the final frontier. For Ali, it was destiny. The 2020-2021 winter season was different. Teams from around the world gathered at base camp, determined to make history. Among them were the Nepali team led by Nirmal Persia, who would go on to achieve the first winter ascent of K2 on January 16, 2021. Their success shook the world. Flags were raised, songs were sung. But not everyone was on that summit. Ali Sadpara was not there. Why? Because his plan was different. He, along with Iceland's Snorri and Chile's Juan Pablo Mohr, chose another window, another chance. They would not be remembered as followers. They wanted to be remembered as pioneers. So while the Nepalis basked in their triumph, Ali and his companions prepared for their own push. And unlike many climbers, Ali wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing something personal, something profound. The chance to show that a Pakistani could stand at the highest, coldest point of his homeland's mountains, even when the world thought it impossible. On February 4, 2021, the trio set off. By then, the weather had already turned brutal. At over 7,000 meters, they fought hurricane-force winds. Frostbitten fingers clutched ropes like iron. Each breath was agony. But Ali pressed on, step by step leading the way. At 8,000 meters, they entered the infamous death zone. Here, oxygen is so thin that the human body cannot acclimatize. Cells begin to die. Muscles refuse to respond. Hallucinations creep in. Every movement is a gamble between survival and collapse. The last confirmed sighting of the team came near the bottleneck, a deadly ice chute beneath towering seracs, massive blocks of ice that can collapse without warning. It's the place where most climbers on K2 meet their end, and that's where Ali was last seen, still climbing, still moving higher, as if defying death itself. The night of February 5th, 2021, was not just another night on K2. It was a night when the savage mountain showed its teeth. Ali Sadpara. John Snorri and Juan Pablo Mohr were seen climbing near the bottleneck, an infamous, narrow passage that has taken more lives than any other section on the mountain. The bottleneck is a nightmare. A steep, icy chute directly beneath massive seracs, towers of ice the size of buildings. They hang above climbers like guillotines, waiting for the slightest tremor to collapse. Climbers call it the executioner's corridor. To pass through it is to gamble with your life. That night, the three men climbed higher into the darkness. Temperatures dropped below 55 degrees C. Winds screamed at hurricane speeds. Their headlamps flickered like fireflies in an endless void. But then, silence, no radio transmission, no satellite ping, no trace of movement. They vanished. At base camp, the climbers' families and fellow mountaineers waited. Hours turned into days. Helicopters from the Pakistani army scoured the slopes. Drones scanned the icy cliffs. Search teams peered through binoculars, desperate for any sign of life. Nothing. It was as if the mountain had swallowed them whole. The Nepali team who had summited weeks earlier sent their condolences. International climbers mourned. But in Pakistan, disbelief reigned. Ali wasn't just a climber. He was a national hero. The idea that he could simply disappear felt impossible. But K2 is merciless. Human life is fragile above 8,000 meters. In the death zone, every breath burns. Every step drains your strength. If you stop even for a moment, the mountain claims you. What likely happened? Theories abound. Some believe they pushed past the bottleneck and reached the summit, only to perish on the descent. A cruel irony, as 80% of mountaineering deaths happen after the summit. Others suggest they were caught in an avalanche, buried forever under ice and snow. But the most chilling detail is this: none of them radioed for help. That silence speaks volumes. It suggests they were overwhelmed instantly, whether by a fall, a collapse of ice, or the sheer brutality of cold. Imagine it. Ali Sadpara, the man who had carried the pride of a nation on his shoulders, standing at the edge of the world. The wind howls like a banshee. His body is numb. His lungs scream for oxygen. He takes one last step, and then nothing. Darkness, silence, eternity. Days stretched into weeks. Families clung to hope. Ali's son, Sajid Sadpara, who had turned back earlier due to an oxygen regulator malfunction, refused to believe his father was gone. He begged for continued searches, but the mountain remained mute. Finally, on July 26, 2021, months after the disappearance, climbers discovered the frozen bodies of Ali, Snorri, and Mohr high on K2. They were locked in eternal poses, their faces unrecognizable, their bodies preserved by ice. The images were haunting. The mountain had turned them into monuments of tragedy. For some, it was closure. For others, it was only the beginning of darker questions. To die on K2 is not like dying anywhere else. The body doesn't decay. It freezes hard as stone. Eyelids crystallize, lips turn black, skin tears like paper. The cold mummifies you, leaving you to stare blankly into eternity. Many climbers remain on the slopes forever, their bodies becoming waypoints for others. The man in the yellow jacket, the sleeping beauty, the frozen couple. Ali joined them. The man who had defied death so many times now lay as part of the mountain itself. His story, once of triumph, became a warning. And yet even in death his mystery endures. Did he touch the summit? Did he achieve the dream that consumed his life? Or was he denied at the very last moment? We may never know, but one thing is certain. On that night in February, the savage mountain claimed not just 3 climbers, but also the last piece of humanity's illusion that K2 could be tamed without cost. When climbers vanish on a mountain like K2, the tragedy doesn't end with the discovery of their bodies. In some ways, it only deepens. Each frozen corpse raises questions that linger like ghosts in the thin air. The case of Ali Sadpara, John Snorri, and Juan Pablo Mohr is no exception. Their disappearance and eventual discovery sparked fierce debates, haunting theories, and unanswered mysteries that refuse to die. Theory 1. They summited one of the most hotly debated questions. Did they actually reach the summit of K2 on that night? For Pakistan, this question isn't just about mountaineering, it's about national pride. If Ali stood on the summit that night, he would have been the first Pakistani to complete a winter ascent of K2, a feat of legendary status. Satellite images, Weather logs and fragments of witness testimony were analyzed. Some climbers claimed they saw faint headlamps moving higher. Others argued no one could have survived long enough to push past the bottleneck. Even today, no definitive evidence exists. Some believe Ali died achieving glory. Others say the summit was never reached. The truth lies buried in ice. Theory 2. Death by avalanche. The bottleneck is infamous for its looming seracs. Climbers pass beneath them, praying they don't collapse. Some theorists argue that on February 5th, one of these seracs broke away, unleashing tons of ice. If true, the climbers may have been swept instantly into darkness, crushed, buried, obliterated. This would explain the lack of radio contact. A sudden avalanche leaves no time to call for help, but when their bodies were discovered months later, they weren't buried deep in ice, they were exposed. This weakens the avalanche theory, or suggests only a partial collapse occurred. Theory 3. Exhaustion and the death zone. At 8,000 meters, oxygen is so scarce that climbers breathe like they're suffocating. Muscles fail, minds hallucinate. The line between life and death thins. Another theory is brutally simple. The three men were defeated by exhaustion. They may have climbed too long, too slow, and their bodies simply shut down. One by one, they collapsed, frozen where they fell. This theory aligns with the haunting fact that most bodies on K2 are found sitting upright, as if merely resting, never to rise again. Theory 4. Equipment failure. A darker possibility. Their gear failed. Ali Sadpara, Ali's son, turned back earlier that night due to a malfunctioning oxygen regulator. Could his father's team have faced similar equipment failures? If their regulators froze, if ropes snapped, or if headlamps failed in the blackness, the climbers may have been left blind, oxygen-starved, and helpless. In the death zone, even the smallest failure becomes fatal. What unsettles experts most is the silence. In mountaineering disasters, climbers often make desperate radio calls, reports of weather, cries for help, final goodbyes. But Ali, Snorri, and Mohr never sent a word. Why? Were their radios frozen? Did they fall so quickly they couldn't react? Or, most chilling of all, did they choose silence, saving their last breaths for survival attempts rather than futile transmissions? Another dimension complicates the tragedy. Politics. Ali Sadpara wasn't just another climber. He was a national icon. His success or failure carried enormous symbolic weight. When he vanished, Pakistan's media and government were desperate for good news. Declaring him the first Pakistani to summit K2 in winter would have been a triumph. This pressure may explain why theories of a successful summit persist, despite lack of proof. In death, Ali became more than a man. He became a myth. In 2021 and again in 2022, Ali Sadpara returned to K2 to search for his father's remains. Against impossible odds, he found the body, high on the mountain. What he saw was horrifying, his father's frozen form, preserved in twisted stillness. Yet for Sajid, this discovery was also a form of closure. But it raised more questions. The body's position suggested Ali may have been descending. Was he coming back from the summit, or had he never reached it at all? What makes the tragedy of Ali Sadpara so haunting is not just his death, but the ambiguity. The mountain holds its secrets close. And in that ambiguity lies the dark romance of K2, the reason climbers keep returning despite the risks. Unlike Everest, where commercial expeditions leave trails of evidence, K2 remains a mystery. A wilderness where truth freezes in silence. Ali's story embodies this. We don't know if he stood on the top of the world. We don't know his final thoughts. We only know that he gave everything, and the mountain gave nothing back. The ultimate question is not whether Ali reached the summit, nor how he died. It is this: why do humans keep climbing K2 knowing the price? For some, the answer is glory. For others, it is obsession. And for Ali Sadpara, perhaps it was destiny. Whatever the reason, the unanswered details of his final climb ensure that his story is not just history, it is legend. The story of Ali Sadpara is more than a tale of one climber's death. It is a mirror, reflecting the timeless battle between human ambition and nature's indifference. Ali lived and died in pursuit of the impossible. His disappearance, his frozen body, and the haunting silence that surrounded his final climb remind us of one chilling truth. K2 never lets go. It doesn't matter if you are a world-class climber, a national hero, or a humble dreamer, the savage mountain does not discriminate. It gives nothing. It only takes, and yet Ali's story is not only about loss, it is also about legacy. He inspired a generation of Pakistanis to dream bigger, to believe that even the deadliest mountain could be challenged. His son Sajid has vowed to continue his father's mission, carrying the torch of ambition into the same unforgiving heights. Ali's name is now carved into the mythos of K2, alongside those who dared and perished. But unlike many, his story carries a universal resonance. A man who rose from humble beginnings, carried the pride of his nation, and gave his life to the mountain he loved. But the haunting question remains, did he reach the summit? This mystery ensures Ali's tale will echo for decades. Perhaps in some sense it doesn't matter. Perhaps his greatest triumph was not standing on the summit, but showing the world that he was willing to try against all odds. Still, the uncertainty keeps us leaning forward, searching, questioning. And that is the strange allure of K2, its ability to leave us unsettled, haunted, and fascinated. Ali Sadpara's story is only one among many. K2 is a graveyard of legends. Each frozen body has its own tale, its own mysteries, its own ghosts. There is the story of the 2008 disaster, when 11 climbers died in a single night. The tale of Fritz Wiesner, who came within 500 feet of the summit in 1939, only to fail, and whose partner never came back. The heartbreaking saga of Alison Hargreaves, who perished on K2 just months after conquering Everest without oxygen. These are not just stories of death. They are stories of obsession, sacrifice, and the unrelenting human spirit. And each one demands to be told. But let Ali's tragedy be more than a tale, it must be a warning. To every climber who dreams of K2, remember, ambition alone is not enough. The mountain does not forgive mistakes, and it does not reward bravery. It stands as a reminder that some dreams demand the highest price, and yet despite that warning, climbers will return. They always do. Because for some, the call of K2 is louder than reason, louder than fear, louder even than death. And now, I turn to you. If you've made it this far, if you've listened to Ali's story, the hope, the terror, the mystery, then you already feel the pull of K2. Here, on K2 Stories, we will continue to bring you these haunting accounts, tales of frozen heroes, vanished climbers, and the thin line between triumph and tragedy. Stories that shock, disturb, and inspire, because they remind us what it means to be human in the face of the impossible. If you want to journey deeper into the shadows of the world's deadliest mountain, subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next story, and share this video so more people can feel the chill of K2, because the mountain stories are endless, and the next one might be even darker.